Okay, welcome back everyone to a very exciting episode. We have with us today my good friend Bennett Dombcik, who happens to be the NDT champion from last year. Also did a little bit of LD, won a big old sword, among other things. Bennett, how are you doing?
The internet cut out, but I'm assuming you said, "How are you?" I'm doing
I
well.
did, yeah,
I haven't talked to, dude. I'm happy just to be talking to you for the first time in
yeah.
like
It's
nine
been
months
way too
since
long.
you sent yourself to Taiwan.
Yeah, I exiled myself. It's good to see you again. Also good to be talking about debate with you. I know that you have a lot of thoughts. Maybe you haven't thought about this in a little while. Been doing too much like reading philosophy books and stuff.
Yeah,
But
too much philosophy.
yeah, I'm excited to pick
I
your
mean,
brain a little bit.
yeah,
So
you not being in North Carolina means that I haven't argued about debate with a lot of people recently.
yeah, that's fair. Um, I have some questions that I actually know the answer to already, but they're like,
All right,
questions for the audience to get to know you a
yeah.
little bit. The first one is just like, how did you get into debate? I wonder.
Uh, yeah, so there's two stories about how I got into the debate, and depending on who I'm talking to, I tell one of them. Um, the story that I'll tell today is that I was on a run with the cross country team at high school, and my good friend Mac Hayes was telling me about how much he loved debate and how much I needed to do it. So going into my sophomore year of high school, I showed up to PF practice with Mac and a bunch of other friends, and we go from there. I ended up doing PF for about a semester until my one of my PF partners had like four over five tournaments or something. Told me that she couldn't come to the Arizona State tournament my sophomore year, and my coach gave me the option of doing Congress, LD, or a speech event, and I chose LD and spent the next two and a half
This is like
years at
I'm
LD.
imagining it as like when you're starting the Pokemon game on your DS and you get a starter.
I mean, that's basically what it was, except I had no idea what any of the events were. And I had like 2 weeks to give myself a brief introduction to philosophy, and I had just zero idea what was going on.
Why did you pick
Um,
LD?
I wanted to do debate, and I didn't think Congress was like debatey enough. Um, I don't know. There's more granular parts of this where like someone convinced me to read the Franken missile argument.
I was
And
gonna say, I remember that one.
yeah,
It was like a
uh,
counterplan on the what was it? The THAAD topic or the missile defense
yeah.
topic?
I basically said we should first strike North Korea. Um, and like novice PF.
Classic. And won a lot of rounds off of it, if I remember.
Yes, I think I went. Yeah.
That was the start of
Um,
your villain era. Um,
yeah, it lasted for a while.
okay, brilliant. What do you think was like the single biggest thing that really got you into debate? Like we've all heard the stories of now how you were introduced into debate, introduced into PF and then later LD. But I feel like there was a point around maybe your junior year, I want to say, where you like really started doing LD. What changed?
Yeah.
How did you like really
So
get into it?
between my sophomore and junior year, I went to the VBI camp. And that gave me like a pretty decent introduction to like what Circuit LD looked like. And like the Holy Cross tournament that fall or that following fall, I ended up like I got to the semifinal round and getting a TOC bid, um, mostly by accident. Like I had no idea what happened in the quarterfinal round, and even less of an idea what was happening in the semifinal round. And it was partially a frustrating experience, just not knowing what was going on. So that kind of jump started the drive to like actually figure out everything happening in LD land, and just wanting to be better because just I have a competitive drive to just want to do well at whatever I'm doing.
Wait, that's
And I
actually
think that
so
was
funny.
probably what happened.
I feel like getting to semis at Holy Cross is like a canon event because if you ask me the same question, like I think literally that's my answer as well. Like went to camp and
Yeah,
got to semis at Holy Cross, and then the rest is history.
yeah. Uh, we had we had a lot of Holy Cross success in high school. I think
True,
that was
yeah.
probably on average our high school's most successful tournament.
Dude, facts. Holy Cross base tournament. You should go to Holy Cross. Okay. I have some questions about policy as well.
Yeah.
Um, I have some questions that are like, what is policy and what advice should we take from it? But I'll start with a question that's more just like about your journey in policy. Um, how how was the transition from junior year to senior year? Because I know that was a big like partner jump, and also like I
Wait,
think
in college?
yeah.
So I didn't debate junior year or most of my sophomore year.
Oh, fair. I guess like yeah, but how was the transition from non-debating to debating?
Uh, it was really stressful. But it was a ton of fun. Like I loved being back in the activity. Uh, so I mean, I'll tell the full policy story, I guess, which is my freshman year in college and the beginning of my sophomore year. I think I went to one tournament my sophomore year. It was all online. And it was just frustrating spending like 13 hours a day in the basement of like a college room, like not seeing the sun. And it took away a lot of the parts of debate that I really enjoyed, just like going to tournaments, like actually doing the rounds in person, I just think is substantially better. Um, and there were just other things happening in my personal life that made it such that I wanted to take time off debate. Um, Personal life changes happened in my junior year of college, and then I was friends with Kelly, and we had this joke that I was going to do like one tournament with her senior year. Um, and it eventually became like if I'm doing one tournament, I want to do well at the tournament, so I'm going to have to just get back into debate anyways. And some point near the end of junior year into the summer, I decided that like I was just going to try to come back for the entire year. And I spent that summer after the topic was announced, just working, trying to get back into the swing of things. And here we are.
Wait, was that was the summer when we were talking a lot about it was the nuclear topic,
Yeah,
right?
it was that nuclear topic.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. I feel like
Yeah.
I was there for history in the making.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we just talked a bunch about like substance stuff on that topic, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love talking about nuclear posture. It was probably my favorite topic in high school too. The Jam Tab topic my senior year of high school was whether or not states should eliminate their nuclear arsenals, which I loved debating. And I think it was nice that I got to close my career um, blasting about nuclear weapons.
Yeah, pretty awesome. And you're one of the only people I think in debate history to end their career on a win. Very rare accomplishment.
Yeah, very, very rare.
Pretty sick.
Very few people get to do it. So I'm really
Now
happy
that
about
you
it.
say it also, like you've got to be one of the most successful policy debaters ever compared to how many rounds, like how many tournaments you've done. Like, yeah.
I mean, I think that that probably is wrong, just given how bad my freshman year was. Like we consistently went 500 at tournaments.
Fair
Um,
enough. I feel like
so
you
I'm
don't
sure
take the
people who
average
like,
though. You take the wins. You take the
yeah, okay, yeah, just the peak. Yeah, it's pretty good.
peak was good. Yeah, peak was peaking. Okay, now to get into some advice then. First question for you. You've now done a lot of LD, you've done a lot of policy as well. There are a lot of changes that are happening in public forum these days. I don't know if you have borne witness to any of them, but public forum is starting to look a lot like mini policy or
Yeah,
taking some pieces of LD as well. So the question for you is, what do you think are the parts of policy and LD debate that you think PF should take? And what are the parts that like PF should leave behind that are not worth, maybe they don't like conform to the format or they're just not worth taking?
I mean, I actually think PF should take very little from both events. I think it's nice that there's this third event that is or was at least some point somewhat isolated from like spreading progressive debate, etc. And I get that that's probably still the case in like a lot of local circuits. But I think just like I don't understand how the time format of PF can be well suited to any of this. The rounds seem way too short. I have the same complaint about LD as well, but the rounds seem way too short to like fully develop arguments. If you're trying to do it in this like super technical policy style, spreading, etc. Um, and like the parts that I really loved about PF, when I think about kind of what I enjoyed doing in high school, was the simpler explaining things to parent judges. Um, so I don't know. I have a lot of nostalgia for that, and I think PF probably isn't very well suited to a lot of the policy style arguments, just given time constraints.
Yeah, that makes sense. So keep the public in public forum a little bit. Uh,
Yeah, to keep the public in public forum. If you want to do partnered policy debate, there's partnered policy debate for a reason. And if you want to do the LD stuff, it doesn't require a partner. So I think if you're really drawn to those things, I don't understand the case for PF needs it.
That makes sense. I guess like to play devil's advocate a little bit, I feel like the
Yeah,
argument is a lot of people sort of treat PF as like the baby debate event for like little children to run around and practice their rhetoric. And I think that there's a little bit of frustration in some parts of the PF community on the national circuit with like debaters who want to really level up their skills and like get better at like whatever real debate, like become technically proficient. And I think that they don't necessarily want to like leave PF to do that,
yeah.
which seems fair. Like I think it's valid
No,
to,
that's reasonable.
yeah. So,
Um,
mhm.
so I think my point there is just that. So I don't understand the necessary connection between like policy arguments and becoming more technical and being a better debater. Like I had, I would like to think that I had some success in like local circuit debate, um, and I don't know. I don't really attribute much of that to how persuasive of a speaker I am. I've never thought of myself as great on that side of the coin. Um, but I think you're still able to execute kind of the technical style arguments. Yeah, I don't get the necessary connection between reading faster, reading more progressive arguments, and being a better, more technical debater.
Yeah, I completely agree with this take. I feel like probably my take here is just like don't spread, don't like read off of the doc every round, but like do dabble in the technical proficiency that we can take a little bit from policy and LD. Like you should make arguments that like oh they ignored this argument so therefore it's true
Yeah,
every round and like also do debate in the right way, right? Like just
yeah,
because you're not spreading or reading off of docs or doing everything that policy and LD does, doesn't mean that like you should just only do rhetoric, right? This seems like there's still something about debate that I think inherently is technical that should be exploited. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a balance to be struck for sure. Okay, moving on a little bit. Who would you say were your biggest inspirations in debate, and what did you learn from them?
Um, so I mean, going all the way back to high school, the person that I probably like watched rounds of the most, and like I was like, this person's insane at debate. I wish I could be that good. With Ishan Bhatt. Um, I just thought was incredible. And then as I moved to policy debate at Michigan, especially, it was kind of unavoidable that I was going to look up to Raphael and Gio and kind of everyone else on that team who is great. Like I think Brandon was awesome just in terms of his research work ethic. And then there are people from other schools who just like I really loved listening to, and that was always an aspect of kind of my skill set that I wish I was better at. So Ram Tambe from Dartmouth is a good example. Yeah, I think that's the short list of people that I just think were really really good at the activity. Oh, and also I should give a shout out to David Edwards. Just looking up to him maybe a bit less, but certainly someone that I respected in the activity and thought was extremely good. And I really enjoyed the times that I got to work with him.
Yeah, 100%. Ishan, by the way, did a little bit of APTA. I've been told by some people that I should interview him later in the series, so we'll see.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun.
Yeah. What do you say like you learned from each of them or like, some of them?
Um, I mean, I think it's a mix from a lot of them. It was something that I was really bad at I think when I started was trying to maintain a mix of technical proficiency while still making like what I thought were true and good arguments in a way that sounds good. And I think all of those people have that in common. Like I think they just are very good debaters for a reason. They understand the technical side of it. They're very good at explaining their arguments, and I think that they're all very well rounded.
That makes sense. Yeah, so like it's interesting. I feel like this is actually maybe the opposite advice that I've heard from some other people in the interviews. Like some people say you need to specialize first and like get really good at what you're good at and like recognize your strengths and then you can like generalize. But you're saying, I mean, maybe you're actually saying the same thing, just like the order is a little bit different or the emphasis is different. But you're saying that
Yeah,
like
I mean,
it's very important to get well-rounded. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think I was better at kind of the technical stuff
Mhm.
from when I was like first starting in debate. Like I remember constantly being frustrated. It's like, no, they dropped this argument. Like they didn't answer it. How is the judge not voting for it? Um, and it took a long time to realize that part of that was my fault for not explaining the argument in a way that sounds good um, and makes sense to people. That's not me. Um, and I think like that was what I spent a long time working on. And I
That's
would like to
that's
think that I
interesting.
got better at it.
Yeah, there's okay, there's a line of questioning I want to pursue here then. I think one of
Okay.
the reasons that this might have happened is because some of the positions that you were known to choose maybe were a little bit out there, a little bit esoteric. I'm thinking specifically, some people might know you as a bit of a Baudrillard
This was literally this was 2 months. It's like this was the beginning of my senior year. I threw it out by December. It wasn't a part of the repertoire after that. But no, it's certainly the case that I read. Like I definitely was like an argument specialist. Um, Even after that, like I did read a lot of Baudrillard to kick off my senior year. But even after that, I think every single neg round on the Gen Feb topic, I went for some variation of the Asteroids pick. Like I had my one position that I was really good at going for. Um, so yeah, I mean that's not an unfair representation of my debate career.
Okay, I've got a question that might be annoying, but I want to pursue it here. I think I've
Okay,
asked you this question probably at least 100 times at this point. Can you honestly explain to me Baudrillard?
uh, I become less and less confident in my ability to do that every day. Um, like I was saying a lot of things that like I borderline didn't understand.
Hmm.
And so I think the pared down version of the argument makes a lot more sense. Um, so for clarity, I went for a lot of like Baudrillard presumption style arguments that's like truth doesn't exist. Um, and I mean, I think like literally the best example of that is just like watching the news today. Just like you can witness how various news agencies report what they think are factual representations of what's happening. And in my mind, at least, what's actually happening and what's being reported are divorced. Um, Now, do I think the argument actually works in debate? Obviously not. Um, this was I don't know. This I was not responsive to coaching during this period of my career. I had a lot of people tell me that like I shouldn't be winning arguments going for this stuff. And a lot of it was me like other people didn't know how to respond, and I just kind of bullied them about it for 50 minutes in an LD round. Um, but no, I don't think that I could fully explain in premise conclusion form a valid Baudrillard argument.
That's so fair. I feel like, hey, the first step is admitting, right? I feel like,
Yeah.
okay, the problem, this is actually something I want to talk about because this seems to be the case in like 90% of PF rounds these days, is that people are, they're just not admitting that this is true, but it seems to be true, is like people are reading arguments that probably don't make sense, like to begin with, but especially like don't make sense given the explanation that comes out in the round. So
Yeah.
my question is like, how do you deal with this? Like, how would you deal with this past version of yourself reading Baudrillard and not maybe fully understanding it if you're on the
Um,
inside?
so like if like current me has to give advice to past me,
Or no, if current you has to beat past you in a debate round, what do you do?
So, I mean, I think the first step is just be very flagrant in cross-examination. That's just like you clearly have no idea what this argument is. Um, and then, so I think if you can win the posturing battle of like who has more command over what's going on in the round, I think that's the first step against people who just clearly don't know what they're talking about. And then the next is just, you know, what your argument of choice is against whatever thing, like against Baudrillard, against whatever else is happening. Um, but it should be very easy to win the cross-ex perception battle if they don't know what's going on. Um, and probably the round that I most thoroughly lost reading Baudrillard was because this happened. It was against Tage. Um, just it was
Age.
bad. It was not a good round at the Florida Blue Key round robin.
Did he just roast you in cross-X?
He roasted me in cross-X. The one in C was like seven off, multiple things. Like I hadn't really thought about how to respond to them before. Because again, I was reading this mostly as a way, or that tournament specifically, I was reading Baudrillard because I didn't want to break the policy stuff that I had written for the tournament proper.
Sure.
Um, it, I say that, then I have to explain post facto why I went for Baudrillard in the bid round and lost. So, there there's some inconsistencies in the story that I'm willing to admit. But certainly, what I was thinking at the time at the round robin was that I wanted to save the policy arguments for later.
Mhm. Makes sense. Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like people don't admit enough how much like a lot of this comes down to literally the perception battle, as you say, like literally vibes. Like I think
Yes.
it's unfortunate how many judges are willing to vote for arguments that someone just confidently says are true without explaining. Like it really seems like a sort of an epidemic throughout a lot of debate events at this point is like judges want to save face and seem technical, and so they're willing to just cast their ballot for whoever seems more confident on like a technical obscure issue. Maybe that's like an unfair representation, but I feel like it's somewhat accurate.
Yeah. I mean, I think the error kind of is a result of the judge not knowing how that argument fits with the rest of the picture of the round. Um, Unless like that, the one thing that they're insisting on being true is like for some reason a knockdown that
Hmm.
kind of makes the rest of the flow irrelevant. Um, but yeah, I mean the perception battle is obviously important. It's hard to convince people that you're right on a subconscious level if you seem behind in the command over the argument part.
Right, that makes complete sense. So on this topic, actually, what do you think are some of these kinds of positions that don't really make sense in like policy debate that you've seen? If any, I don't know.
Um, I mean, that don't make any sense at all, I think is very few.
Mhm.
Something that I've recently been frustrated with in a policy debate is the rise of philosophy.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Yeah, tell me more.
so, I mean, I think Texas started reading Kant midway through last year. I think they broke it against us at the Harvard tournament. Um, and that has proliferated more than I would like across both college and high school policy debate.
And
And
PF,
this
actually.
is, oh, it's that in PF now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, this is a source of personal frustration, not just because I did LD, so like I have a basic introduction to Kant, but I'm also doing like I will be doing a PhD in philosophy. So just like people flagrantly misunderstanding philosophy arguments is a thing that particularly annoys me. Um, but
But
yeah,
well, okay,
I,
so
I
give us the master class. Like what is the right way to understand it? What is the wrong way that people are using to under like what are the misrepresentations that you're seeing in these rounds and how do you correct for them?
um, so misrepresentation might be the wrong way to describe it, but it's clearly appropriated in a way to make it like suited for debate
Hmm.
that isn't responsive to like the actual philosophical literature. And like that's probably the thing that annoys me the most. It's just like it's so far away from what people actually think now.
Right.
Um, so mm, a classic case of like something Kant thinks is wrong is that you can't lie, basically no matter the circumstances. And the reason he thinks this is obscure to me, I don't agree at all with his take. But basically, if you rationally will lying, it creates some sort of inconsistency in your rational will, because you can derive a contradiction where you both want people to believe you and you want people to not believe you, yada, yada, yada. Um, and every modern philosopher thinks Kant is wrong about this. Like even the modern Kantians have like creative ways of getting around the problem. Um, and the way philosophy shows up in debate because of the nature of debate is it's so dogmatic and it's so like
Right.
100% or 0%, um, that the common sense middle ground positions are excluded from being read, and those are just the positions that are obviously correct to me. Like I think utilitarianism is wrong. I think like straight up Kant is wrong. Um, so it was just difficult for me in the rounds because the best way to answer Kant is just by being a straight up utilitarian. At least if you're
Right.
trying to convince policy
Okay.
judges.
That makes sense.
Um, yeah,
This is okay. This is actually a great conversation to have. I've been wanting to have this conversation with you forever. I think this opens up like a whole other door of like a whole hallway of different arguments that we can have because I think this is the root cause of a lot of my frustrations is this 100% or 0% thinking. It happens with philosophy, but I think it happens with everything. And it seems especially prevalent in policy and therefore especially prevalent in any forms of debate that mimic policy. The reason that I have a problem with it is it seems like what's happening is everyone is pretending that debate is a binary. Like, you either have extinction or you don't. Either this is
yeah,
categorically impermissible or it's categorically permissible. Either it's hardcore Kant or it's hardcore util. There's no like middle ground. There's no nuance in any of these things. Where we forget that like some things can be somewhat true, or some things can be somewhat likely, but not 100%. And I want to ask you about that. Like, why do you
yeah.
think this is happening, and what do we do about
Um,
it? 'Cause I think it's a bad thing. Maybe you don't.
so, I mean, I have a diagnosis for the philosophy part of it. I'm not sure about the rest.
Hmm.
The philosophy part of it is just because the 100 versus 0% Kant stuff is more strategic. It's much harder to win the middle ground positions as like a reason it refutes the case.
Hmm.
Because you can't go for like the weird tricks where like the act is forced to lie or like taxation is theft, which is a D rule. Like those positions become much harder when you adopt the like more robust philosophical positions. The second is just that it's hard to research philosophy, and anyone who's done LD probably has experienced this at some point. Um, where like, I mean, I look back at LD files now and like, and everyone is reading like the same cards constantly. There's no argument development. And then I have to remember that like I'm out of college, like I'm about to do a PhD in philosophy. I need to give way more credit to the high schoolers who have spent no time reading it seriously. Like it's a hard thing to read and to understand the nuances. And I think it's just more time than people are willing to give to it given the strategic value.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I'm shaking my head because like the problem is it's commendable, I guess, that there's any time being spent on trying to understand the nuances, but the problem is it seems like they're being used before any understanding has been reached. Like, okay, the people who break the position initially, even they don't seem to really fully understand it. I mean, hey, like
Yeah.
you probably don't fully understand it. Like the PhDs don't fully like 100% understand it all.
No one understands what Kant says. Like
Right.
that was lost when he died.
It's like
Our ability to have a one-to-one understanding.
it's like I feel like there's a combination of three things that are happening. Like one, the people who break the position for the first time, like they don't know what the fuck is going on. But two, the people who copy them, they know even less about what's going on. They don't even know what the original person who broke the position means. And then three is like there's the structure of debate competitively incentivizes you to pretend that it's all or nothing, to pretend that you're using the most extreme cases of Kant, to even exaggerate it beyond what Kant originally said. And so the combination of these three things means that like the vast majority of philosophical positions you see in any debate format are like gobbledygook, like literally
Yeah.
don't make any sense, and we're all just pretending that they do. I don't know. Seems like
No, that's fair. So I think that's certainly a fair representation of what happened in like the Harvard quarterfinals round when Texas first read Kant.
Hmm.
But I will give them credit. When we debated them again in round 8 of the NDT, they had a much stronger grasp of what was actually happening. But that was because they spent the year basically reading and researching, um, which is I think the correct way to treat the position if you want to seriously go for it in rounds.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just don't think high schoolers are really doing that.
Yeah, but like it's hard. Like
Yeah.
think of where you were at in your intellectual development in high school, and think of like whether or not you could fully understand the arguments that you understand now.
Yeah. Okay, okay. So then the question becomes like, does this imply that people shouldn't? Like, one argument that I could make is given that we agree that most, like the vast majority of high school debaters are like incredibly misrepresenting these philosophy papers to the extent that like actually no one in the debate knows at all what's going on. They're like so many steps removed from the truth of what the philosopher maybe originally intended. Given that that's true, and we agree on that, should these positions just not be read? Slash, should they be less common or what?
So I think there are strategic reasons why they're going to be read no matter what. But I mean, to be clear, I also think there's large amounts of benefit from even like horribly misrepresented philosophy positions being read. Like just for my own personal life, I would not be studying philosophy today if I didn't have exposure to it in high school. Like that's what caused me to take philosophy classes in college. Like I primarily think of high school debate as a learning activity.
Yeah.
Um, it's not until you spend probably more than a couple of years that you really have a grasp of what's going on. And I think the reason why I loved high school debate so much was like, yes, it was fun to compete and fun to do all that stuff. But like looking back on like what I value about it, it's mostly like I had exposure to a bunch of different literature bases. I got to learn about philosophy. So even if like they're wrong, I think the risk that it encourages people to learn more about the positions and like to actually be students, I think that is good enough.
That's cool. Yeah, this wild. This is like the first time I've heard like one of these discourse education arguments like IRL.
Dude, I think like debate is an educationally valuable activity.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm with you there. I think I probably learned more from debate than school. Like period.
Yeah,
By
me
a
too.
lot. Um I had a hot take about Phil in debate actually. So PF right now is at a crossroads where it could be the case that when we introduce Phil to PF for realsies, we do it in a very different way than policy and LD have done it. Because it's like so new to PF. Like this is the first year that anyone has ever broken any fill positions at all, to my knowledge, or at the very least, like it's become popularized somewhat this year. Um, However, the way that it's being done, I think predictably, is just sort of taking like Kant cards off of the wiki from LD and policy. It's imitations of imitations of imitations at this point. Um, my hot
Something, but
Yeah, yeah, right. Something Baudrillard. Um, my hot take, and this is, I think, quite a hot take. I think there should not be any cards read when introducing most fill positions. I think that you should, like, to be clear, I think you should research it. I think you should go and like read all of the papers. I don't think you should quote them in the round. I think at best you
um,
should paraphrase them, but really, I think my position is you should just give the argument yourself.
yeah, I mean, so this is the thing in LD. Like people just do um analytic in the like debate analytics sense, not the philosophy analytic sense. But people just do like analytics philosophy, where they just like construct a syllogism. Um, and I mean, I thought it was annoying in high school, like when I had to debate against it, because like I had trouble understanding what the syllogism was. But I think it's a good way to do it in terms of just like learning more about the positions. Like the the syllogistic construction of utilitarianism is really easy. So just like premise one, consequentialism, we should do the thing that creates the best consequences. Um, Premise two, hedonism, uh, the best consequences is the maximization of pleasure and the minimization of pain. Conclusion, hedonic act utilitarianism.
True.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'd be a good way to do it. You don't really need to quote people. Um, like the arguments are relatively intuitive as to why pleasure is intrinsically good, pain is intrinsically bad.
Yeah.
And I think the consequentialism premise is just something that people are drawn to in
Hell yeah.
general.
Hell yeah. I feel like this would be more of an educational way to do it, to be honest. I feel like it would
Yeah.
yield more like interesting debates than just like who can misrepresent this philosopher the best.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is like you can just pull the the syllogistic form
Mhm.
from papers. Like they just have them in the really good books. So,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
fair. Yeah, but oh man, stupid competitive incentives always race to the bottom to see who can make the most like incomprehensible version of the argument.
yeah, I mean, there are probably reasons why incomprehensible versions of the argument um, are bad for competitive reasons. Like
Hmm.
the judge won't understand them. Um, and it's also like some of the incomprehensible philosophy positions are just like obviously unintuitive, where even if you don't have a background in philosophy, you should be smart enough to be like, wait, that justifies X conclusion in this case, but you should obviously have Y conclusion in this case, which is reductio to the argument. Uh, yeah, like I wish people were generally better at putting that stuff out, but I wasn't good at it then either. So
Yeah. What do you think are like the best ways to answer Phil in general, analytically? Is it just like your logic produces a contradiction, your logic produces a repugnant conclusion? Like what are the other
um,
ones, I guess?
well, repugnant conclusion is probably the simplest one.
Yeah.
Um, although this gets into like the whole how to debate philosophy thing.
Hmm.
Um, because if someone, so like, let's say I say utilitarianism is true, and someone like that justifies the repugnant conclusion, namely being that you should have this world where everyone is like barely happy, but there are
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
trillions of them, and that's better than like 100-person utopia because the net sum of utility is greater on the world with trillions of people. Um, and the utilitarian could just be like, yeah, that's true. You don't
Yeah,
have
right.
like you don't have a competing philosophical syllogism. Um, so whatever. Like you haven't answered the premises. You need to answer the premises because if you don't answer the premises, whatever conclusion that you get, I'm gonna agree with. Um, so it does require a bit more complexity. Namely, you have to have some sort of competing framework that you can try to justify. Uh,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like that's logical, right? Like it's the same way that I don't know, like every argument has uniqueness, right? Like everything in debate is comparative. You can't just negate something without like comparing that thing to what would otherwise be in its place.
yeah,
And philosophy is the same. Like how else do we evaluate whether or not an action is ethically correct or not? Um,
yeah. I mean, I am tentatively an act contractualist. If anyone watching this wants to find that out and figure out how that would apply to debate rounds.
Yeah, if you go research act contractualism and you find like a busted position, go like email Bennett, get his thoughts on it.
Uh,
You'll get
yeah, I
like
mean,
all the best lit.
if you're actually interested in reading about this, the first thing I would suggest is reading What We Owe to Each Other by Tim Scanlon.
Okay,
Um,
nice book recommendation. I think this.
he's a rule contractualist, but the book is good
Oh,
enough where I'm okay with it.
boo. Nice. Is that the one that I like started reading and then didn't?
Yes, I've tried to get every single one of my friends to read this book. It's
Damn,
so good.
it's tough. I think I got through the intro. It was an interesting intro. Uh,
Um,
okay, a few more debate arguments, or debate questions rather. Um,
yeah,
this is a bit of a funky one. What do you think are the best and worst arguments you've ever read in any format?
the worst argument that I've read is obviously the Baudrillard critique.
Yeah, I kind
I think
of.
uh, the best argument. I mean, there just is a special place in my heart for the asteroids pick. Nuke's topic. Um,
Describe the argument. Like it's just
yeah.
you should
So
remove
that, that
asteroids
resolution
by
was
or you should remove nuclear weapons by firing them at asteroids or.
No. So that topic was states ought to eliminate their nuclear arsenals. I read a counterplan that was like states ought to form some sort of non-governmental organization or super governmental organization that had the authority to launch a limited subset of nukes at asteroids to divert them. And
Go.
that group would have all authority over when to launch nukes, and every other nuke would be eliminated.
Nice.
Um, it basically fiated away every single solvency deficit, and there was only a risk that we needed nukes to stop asteroids. Thinking about that counterplan now, it probably loses to competition arguments, because you can plausibly say that the states no longer have their nuclear arsenals in a world
Yeah, I
where
was gonna
this
say,
other
right?
body
Like,
has authority over them, but no one ever really said that. And I'm sure the counterplan text was written in a way where that was not a competition argument that like immediately beat the counterplan.
that's fair. It makes me wonder, like, why are people not making this argument? Because it does seem like, I feel like that would be my first instinct is like, doesn't this technically mean
Well,
that
I think
people
I hid. I mean, I think this was a classic case of like I didn't really describe the counterplan in that way until the 2NR, depending on what they said in the 1AR. Um, and if they said the right things in the 1AR, then I would describe the counterplan in the way that actually competed, and I would just beat the solid states.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Um, okay, we were texting earlier about this. I want to ask you in this interview. You were saying that you think that the new administration in the US, the Trump 2.0, should make some pretty
yeah.
massive changes to like the meta in policy on the NDT circuit. How do you like what changes do you think will happen and what changes do you think should happen to the arguments?
So I mean, this is not just about the NDT. Like, I think this should change how you do debate broadly. Um, Primarily is I think like it just well, uniqueness is just way different. Just across the board, like everything's more volatile. You don't really know what's going to happen day to day. Um, I think without trying to just like, I mean, I will be coaching like and judging at the NDT, so I don't want to say too many things. Um, but like, I worry a lot that like very common advantages based in like U.S. leadership, um, the rule of law, all of those things will be significantly worse. Neg disadvantages about basically any politics disadvantage, like agenda, I think is largely locked in because of the way that senators and congressmen will vote along party lines. Court politics is a whole nother story, given the fight between federal justices and the executive branch, and then as well as whatever the Supreme Court will do about it.
Hmm.
But I basically think just like the change in what the status quo looks like uh, has happened extremely fast, and I am very I'm very doubtful that the literature that supports common affirmative and negative positions will have changed along with that. So like
Interesting.
I don't know anyone like yeah like I don't know if the people proposing a carbon tax have like written why carbon tax is good post Trump,
Right, right.
um, or stuff like that.
Yeah, so it seems like
Um,
a sort of a blanket response that you can make to almost any card on the other side, or like on any side. It's just like your author clearly doesn't account for Trump 2.0, and then like explain logically why this changes the conclusions of the article or something.
yeah, I mean, I think there are things that like would survive that. So
Mhm.
like you could just say a carbon tax is good because it forces companies to emit less, because of basic cost reasons. And that seems to survive the like, but Trump is president. Uh, but things like it would inspire global climate leadership, seem much more vulnerable to the obviously no
Yeah,
response.
right. That makes sense. Which side do you think like just in general in the world? I guess both on the policy topic and eventually we'll start talking about the PF topic pretty soon here. Which side do you think is favored more by Trump 2.0 being a thing? Aff or neg?
Um, I think if the app can write advantages in a way that avoids the executive branch clearly messing with them. They get Fiat, which is really nice.
Hmm.
So you get past circumvention and stuff. Um, so if you can write advantages creatively, then I think the AF should be favored by it because it significantly impairs generic DAs like politics.
Hmm.
It makes internal net benefits to process counterplans based in separation of powers much worse. Uh, so I think that the harm to negative generics in general is much larger, and the AF has a lot of creativity in virtue of being able to write whatever they want.
That makes a ton of sense. I feel like this is maybe more true in PF because PF is weird because we don't really have fiat, right? Like we don't have plans, counterplans. So I feel like in PF, the way that this works is it hurts the neg and it hurts the aff in kind of different ways. Like it hurts the neg in the same way as policy. It hurts the uniqueness, obviously, right? But it hurts the aff in like the link level because the implementation of the resolution is up for debate in PF, like normal means is completely debatable in PF, as in like the neg can make the argument plausibly that the Trump administration will do the policy in a bad way, and this is the most likely way that the AF would happen.
Mm,
And the AF doesn't get to, they don't have any power, like they don't have any plan, they don't have any power to say, no, we won't do it that way. Because in PF, you have to say, like, actually, it is most likely that it is done in a smart way, which seems less and less true with the current administration. And so I feel like
interesting.
there is room on the neg to make arguments on like the nuclear energy topic that say like maybe nuclear energy in general is good, but the investment in nuclear energy in this in specific administration will happen in such a way as to produce harms, maybe even to like hurt the nuclear industry itself or like create other harms of DA like generic DAs to a greater extent than normal. Like I don't know, Doge
Yeah.
cuts mean that like accidents are more likely or something.
Yeah. If I was the AF, I would probably just have some theory argument why we get to specify the normal means. Like, I think that would basically be
Wait,
how I get
really?
around that.
Wait, I want to
Yeah.
talk about this actually. That's really interesting. So the reason for this is because of the rules. Like the NSDA rules say
Oh, okay. Yeah.
no counterplans. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything about
Yeah.
what the heck does a plan mean? What the heck does a counterplan mean?
Yeah.
Like those are just words. Do you think there's room for such an argument?
Um, I think there's room given the like NSTA rule specification, there's probably less room.
Hmm.
But I mean, I am very generally on board with like AF choice. And I think if the AF is written, it's like, look, this is all of our solvency advocates, like every single card and the advantage says this is how it would be implemented. We think that we should be able to defend that.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I'm gonna show you something real quick. I want your help interpreting this. This is a section from the NSTA rules. I don't actually know if this is the right one. Let me find
Yeah.
practical. So yeah, you can see it in blue in multiple parts. I think this is the one that actually is from the NSTA rules. So the section on plans and counterplans in PF says in public forum debate, the association defines a plan or counterplan as a formalized, comprehensive proposal for implementation. Neither the pro or con side is permitted to offer a plan or counterplan. But then it says rather they
Yeah,
should
they should
offer
offer as any sort of
reasoning
position
to
of
support a
advocacy.
position of advocacy. Generalized practical solution. How do you interpret this? What room does this allow for specification?
Uh, I think a lot. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Walk me through this.
like
Like,
you could,
what's the theory argument?
so so you could say something along the lines of like formalized comprehensive proposal for implementation has to look something like a congressional resolution.
Hmm.
Um, we're not anything close to that. We think that nuclear energy implemented in this sort of way uh, is sufficient to be a position of advocacy instead of a formalized comprehensive proposal. And we think that this is a generalized way. We don't offer specific, like, it's not about agency. Like, we don't say, like, this is the agency that would have control over everything. We don't say this is the way tax dollars would be allocated. But we do have kind of enough of a plan um, to get around the Trump 2.0 circumvention arguments.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. So, for example, like, do you think you could literally just say, like, no, we won't do it that way? Like the neg says, if Trump increases investment in nuclear energy, he will like only increase investment in like the biggest nuclear energy companies, and that will create monopolization. Like, you just say, nah, we're not going to do that. And that's like a generalized
Um,
practical solution to that DA.
so I think that there needs to be some further appeal. So, like what I was referencing earlier about like this is what our solvency advocates say would happen.
Hmm.
I think, and then that should be coupled with an argument about why like we should get to choose what generalized practical solution we defend. Like the neg shouldn't have Aff choice. It unfairly inflates neg win rate because they can pick the least favorable affirmative position and then argue against that. So it's basically like fighting a straw man.
So
Um,
I'm a little bit confused about that point though. It seems like it totally makes sense. Like neg should not have AF choice. Like obviously the neg should not be able to specify what the AF looks like just because they say so. But it
yeah.
also seems somewhat more balanced to hold the position which is sort of the norm in PF that like both sides have equal ground to argue about what the most probable implementation of the resolution is. That's how PF usually works right now. And I think that's largely because people are ignoring this completely. But that at least solves the fairness stuff. Like, Neg does not get to get away with saying, this is what the AF looks like because I said so, and just pick the worst AF. They have to defend reasons why that is the most likely version of the AF. And the AF can answer those reasons and provide reasons of their own why the most likely version of the AF is actually good.
Um, yeah. I mean, like I get that, and like I understand why there is like a fairness appeal to most likely version. Um, but it's a weird sort of fairness idea.
I guess,
That's
like,
like what would happen in like what seems intuitive to me is that like look, this says that we get to support a position of advocacy.
yeah.
Um, we think that this is a position of advocacy uh, that is a generalized practical solution, or kind of however you want to phrase it, that incorporates the permitted language. Um, and we think that the neg should have to respond to that.
Yeah, 100%. To be clear about the like appeal to fairness stuff, I guess the argument is not that it's more fair to interpret the rules that way. It's just that it's like they're both fair, right? Like this is also fair um to interpret it in the way that you are. It's just not necessarily unfair to interpret it in the other way. But this is probably the right way,
Uh,
like of the two, because this is in the rules. So like if you're tie breaking
well,
between.
I mean, I think there is an argument why most likely is unfair.
Oh,
And
really?
the argument, yeah, the argument just is that what is most likely changes constantly.
Right.
And it is something that lacks kind of the stableness that we want debate to have.
Hmm.
Um, so, you know, instead of being grounded in like, or solely grounded rather in the real world of like what would happen if we told Congress that's like, okay, you need to pass something that increases domestic nuclear energy production. What would they do? Is very different than telling Congress that like you need to do this within certain guidelines. Um,
Right.
that
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So when you're going about defending like, oh, this is not a plan, this is not a counterplan, you gave me some examples already. This is the last question I'll ask about this. Like for example, your interpretation would be something like formalized comprehensive proposal probably means like a congressional bill, but ours does not look
yeah
like that. Like we're just sort of providing like general guidelines. Um, so I guess there's two different ways to justify what like this is kind of a T debate at this point. It's just like the T
yeah
rule or something. There's two ways to justify this kind of interpretation. Like one is like it is more true to the words, um, to the text of the rules. And two is that it's like it makes for a better debate if we interpret it this
yeah.
way. Which of those two do you think is more valid, and how would you provide reasoning for either one?
I think both are fine. Like this is something that I'm relatively agnostic on.
Uh-huh.
Uh, so this is just like the precision versus debatability argument
Yeah.
in like normal topicality debates. So the precision argument goes something along the lines of like precision shapes debatability. The words need to have some meaning, and we have to debate within the context of what those words mean. Um, and kind of the most precise interpretation will kind of be agreed upon by the literature. So that will then shape the most fair debates that have equitable literature balances. The other side is just like, look, we have an interpretation of the words that's good enough to meet the floor of precision, but kind of what might be the most legally precise interpretation would be unfair in these variety of ways, and that matters more because debate is ultimately a competitive game. Yada yada yada.
That makes sense. Last question about this. Do you think your interpretation of these rules allows for advantage counterplans on the neg and PF?
Probably not.
No? Really? Why?
I so yeah, I mean, I don't so I kind of don't understand
I'll
what it
give you an
means
example.
for the neg side to support a position of advocacy.
Yeah, that's the problem. I don't know what that means either. But like
Yeah,
okay, let's say that you're right. Like we can take the same standards, like the same interpretation
yeah,
of the AF, right? Like it just means
yeah,
that
yeah.
neg is not allowed a congressional bill, but they also get room to like defend a general practical solution to something. It thinks that you're getting a thumbs up. Um,
Yeah, no,
and
no. I
so
mean, I get it. Like, I think
yeah,
like it says they refers to pro and con side.
yeah,
Um,
it literally, yeah.
yeah, I mean, whatever. Yeah,
Yes.
sure. I advantage counterpoints are fun. The neg can get them.
Let's go. So to be very clear then, if a PF team reads an advantage counterplan and then the other and they don't say the word counterplan, whatever. And the other team says, "Hey,
Yeah,
that's not allowed." And then the team that read it pulls out this, then you vote for them.
yeah.
Yeah?
I mean, I'm not auto assigning the ballot there. Like, I
Sure.
think
But
this is
okay,
not the be
yeah,
all end
it's
all. Like, I
like
think there are arguments to be had.
yeah,
Um,
like assuming that the advantage counterplan is the deciding factor in the round. Like assuming that like if the advantage counterplan is a valid argument, then like the AF just goes away or something and the neg has some other DA.
uh, yeah, dude. I think the Franken missile is a generalized practical solution.
Let's go. Bring Franken missile back to PF. It was always legitimate. It was all you were just ahead of your time, Bennett.
Um, dude, I mean, this is just it's something you gave to me. It was like, yeah, here's this position that I think would be really fun. Because this was also the tournament that I was alone. This was the
Yeah,
Maverick
I
tournament.
remember. I remember. Uh, that's crazy. Full circle. You should all run Franken missile advantage counterplan. It works every topic. Terminal
Got
on.
the first break North Korea.
True. Even if it doesn't apply to the topic, that's just the go-to advantage counterplan. Solves all app offense. Okay. I think it's about time we talked about nuclear energy. So
Cool.
the wording of the PF April topic is actually not about production of nuclear energy. The wording is very precise. It says, resolved, the United States federal government should substantially increase its investment in domestic nuclear energy. What are your first thoughts on the topic?
I mean, this investment might be a little bit weird. I don't know if there's anything you can say about like investment is good for reasons other than production,
Mhm.
although that might be possible. I think that would be a fun thing to look into. But I mean, to me, it mostly just seems like nuclear energy, good, bad topic, obviously.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, the reason I'm playing around with the words here is because I've written some arguments on the neg for why government investment like worsens production of nuclear energy. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's fair.
Um,
Although you kind of hamstring yourself if you say that on the negative, because then you can't
yeah,
read any DAs to nuclear energy.
yeah,
Otherwise,
that's the
the
problem.
AF can just be like, yeah, no, look, we decrease production. That's good.
Yeah, you got to be a little bit delicate with it to try to maintain as much of your DA ground as possible. Um, okay. You are going to get $10,000 if you beat the PFTOC champions. But I'm giving you only 1 day to prep against them. This is like we're pretending this is like day after they win the TOC. Um, I trust you. I believe you probably will win this $10,000. You're an NDT champion.
Yeah.
They're a bunch of high schoolers, but you still want to make sure you maximize your odds of winning as much as possible. So, assuming you get to pick your side on this topic and also the order, what do you pick? What's your plan? What strategy are you going in with?
I would be negative. I would speak second, and I would go for the oil DA.
Oh, wait, that's hilarious. Actually, there was another debater on this interview, Ale Perry, who said the exact same thing. But
The oil DA is really good.
explain. Like, what do you mean by the oil DA? What is the like uniqueness, link, impact? Why do you think it's smart? Why do you think it outweighs, etc.?
Um, so I mean, there's a lot of versions of the oil DA, so I'm not sure exactly which one I would go for. But a simple one is just that like Saudi Arabia really cares about being able to export oil. Uh, they get a lot of money from it. If if nuclear energy production increases, that decreases the amount of money that they will make from oil exports. That causes bad things in the Saudi Arabian economy. They proliferate. They fail to fund Vision 2030. A bunch of other things might happen. Um, that's bad. It causes Middle Eastern nuclear war for a bunch of reasons. Um, but I mean, I think I would invest very heavily in defense. Like I think like the oil DA is just it's a generic. It's good enough where you're probably going to win some risk of it if you're debating well.
Mhm.
And I feel confident in my ability to get the case very low against the PFTOC champions.
Fair enough. How would you go about getting the case low? Like, first of all, what do you expect the case to be from the AF? And then second, what are your strategies at going about, mitigating it down to basically zero?
I mean, I think they're probably. I mean, I hope they say something along the lines of like nuclear energy good for climate change reasons. Nuclear energy good for kind of grid stability. It's a more sustainable source of energy. Um, and you have your impact defense. You have your reasons why climate change isn't going to get that bad, why intervening actors are going to adapt to it. You might have a Mac style argument that maybe government investment in nuclear energy isn't sufficient to kind of get it off the ground in the way needed to solve Aff impacts, but it sends the signal to Saudi Arabian markets to cut oil exports. So just the signal is sufficient. We don't actually need to win, but they result in nuclear energy production. So it doesn't delink the DA, but it cuts the case. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel pretty good about just like no impact to grid, no impact to climate. You're not going to result in that much energy production. Even if it does, it's not going to solve the impacts.
Yeah, that's a lot of defense. Death by a thousand
Yeah,
cuts. No
yeah. That's why.
not messing with the
Uh,
good warming good stuff.
I'm I'm probably not going for warming good.
Fair enough. Okay, what do you think the most likely answers that they would give to the oil DA are? And like, how would you respond to them? How do you defend it?
Um, they might say something. I mean, they'll definitely say Trump is going to drill U.S. oil, which will cut the share of Saudi sales.
This is like a third,
Um,
like a non-unique.
yeah, uh, they'll probably say the amount we increase production isn't enough to cut um, Saudi sales. Depending on the impact scenario, I'm sure they'll have impact defense. If it's Vision 2030, they might say it's not going to get funded now, or the funding is locked in, so the cuts to oil production don't matter. If it's more general economy based, they might say like global economy volatile, thumps the impact, no impact to Saudi econ decline, no pro lift. They don't have the technological capacity. They could say all these things. I'm sure if I had a day, I would have evidence to answer them. And I mean, at the end of the day, like, look, I don't think this DA is going to be huge, but I think I'm going to keep the DA relatively large, and it'll be death by a thousand cuts against the case.
So yours mostly the strategy is just like you think you're going to out debate them on the link level. Like you will be able to more sufficiently answer the arguments that they make against your DA compared to them answering the arguments that you make against their advantages.
Yeah, and I think I'll have link tricks about the perception of investment.
Right.
Um, that they might. I mean, they'll probably have answers to it, but I think perception links in general are really good and pretty hard to really cut against in meaningful ways. So I feel good about the link debate. The uniqueness thing might be something to worry about. I haven't done oil price research in a while.
Fair
So,
enough.
uh, maybe if oil prices are really low right now, I would figure out some way to read like the inverse oil DA or something.
Sure.
Um,
I have
so
one last question about some of this stuff with like the link tricks. One thing I've kind of always wondered is it seems like a lot of these things like lowering the threshold that you need to cross with the link in order to access the impact. Also, like, it creates a bit of a double bind for you, right? Like it makes
yeah,
you more vulnerable to the non-unique arguments. So how do you deal with that? Like, do you just like predict which of the responses you think is stronger and then like cut against it? However, like for example, like if you think the non-uniques are weaker, then maybe you will read a perceptual link trick because you think
Yeah.
the no link arguments are stronger.
Um, yeah, I mean that would be one way to think about it. Uh, but you also just like you should be framing uniqueness in like a favorable way to yourself.
Mhm.
So like one way to do it with the oil DA is you say something along the lines of like, look, Trump has promised to increase production of oil. So it seems like we're generally going to be like a pro-oil economy. And then they suddenly, by fiat, announce that they're investing in nuclear energy production, which is a much bigger shock than it normally would be if like the Biden administration did it. So it would take a bigger hit. It would be a bigger hit on the market than it normally would be.
Okay, I'm gonna test
So
something
it
out. This is gonna be a little bit funky, but bear with me here. I'm experimenting. This is like the whole point of these interviews to some extent.
yeah,
You make all of these arguments. I say on the AF, um, we will advocate for a general practical solution, which is just after we announce that we will increase nuclear energy, we will like also announce to Saudi Arabia, don't worry, we're going to buy more of your oil anyway.
it's just obviously extra topical.
Yeah, but it's still a general practical solution. Like you get extra topical advantage counterplans as well. They don't have to compete.
No, the general practical solution, the Aff offers has to fall within the bounds of the resolution,
Why?
because they could arbitrarily add planks to solve DAs,
Yeah,
which is unfair to the negative.
it's not unfair if the neg gets to do the same thing with advantage counterplans against advantages.
No, the Aff gets deficits against advantage counterplans.
Well, then the neg still gets the deficits. Like it seems to be symmetrical, right? Like the neg gets the same logical arguments against the like effective advantage counterplans and the extra topical like solvency on the aff. Like for example, you just say like that's not enough to solve the perception.
Um, so it's not symmetrical because the the Aff gets solvency deficits comparative to an advocacy. The neg gets solvency deficits comparative to the status quo.
But that's just
And in the
complaining.
in the world where the Aff gets extra topical
Right,
advantage counterplans.
right. But that's just complaining that the aff has a policy in the first place. Like they hmm.
Also the neg doesn't get competition arguments. The Aff gets competition arguments. Like
Wait, actually, hold on.
this is zero.
If we're interpreting the rules in the way that we agreed upon, then the neg also gets an advocacy. So they don't have to compare to the status quo. They also compare to an advocacy.
Okay, so the neg might have the option to have advocacies, but the neg can never advocate for the resolution.
That's true, but the aff
So the Aff gets permutations against extratopical advantage counterplans, but the neg does not against the plan.
but the neg does get permutations against extra topical solvency from the aff.
Yeah, I mean you could pick out of that. You could say that we could do it as well.
I'm still unclear why it's not symmetrical then.
Well, there's this extra thing the Aff has, namely the resolution,
Wait. I
which breaks the symmetry.
understand that like the advocacy on the AF and the advocacies on the neg, like plan versus counterplans, that seems asymmetrical, to be clear, because the advocacies on the neg can never be the AF, right? Which
Yeah.
is the argument that you made earlier. Let's put that aside now. Like the plan counterplan.
Okay, so
No,
we
no,
get to
no,
set it
no,
aside.
no. Bear with me. Bear with me. We're gonna put this aside for a second. The AF
Okay.
plan, the neg gets a counter plan. We're just not calling them plans or counter plans, and we're taking them and we're putting them aside. Now we are introducing the extra topical things. I'm using the word extra topical, which usually means the ones on the AF, but we're gonna call the advantage counter plans
Yeah.
extra topical as well. These are just like a new class of arguments that either side can make that says we have a solution to a problem that the other side identifies. These are something that both sides get on both sides, meaning like you can perm them no matter what side you're on. Like if I say there's something independent of the topic that we're going to do to resolve this problem, then you say I get that too. We both agree with that. Why is this part not symmetrical?
Uh, so it might be symmetrical in like form,
Mhm.
but it's not symmetrical in function. Uh, because the Aff, um, when they say like extra topical counterplan to solve the oil DA, uh, the neg can say, sure, we can also announce that. Um, and they can also say that like, no, that doesn't solve the link. So like those are
Yeah,
the two things that they can say.
right. That makes sense.
If but the AF in response. So I guess the thing I'm trying to figure out exactly how to phrase this.
Wait. The app can
Um,
say the same two things in response to an advantage
no,
counter.
no, yes, the AF can say the same two things in the response to the advantage counterplan. Um, but the neg permuting the AF counterplan doesn't do anything for them because it's supposed to be a thing that solves their DA.
Right.
But the AF permuting the negative counterplan does do something for them because it demonstrates that there's not an opportunity cost to the negative advocacy.
No. Because the negative advocacy wasn't intended to be an opportunity cost in the first place. Like these advantage counter plans, I think
Yeah,
specifically
no,
in,
no, it is an opportunity cost. It's the DA. The opportunity cost is the DA.
but then, but then the opportunity cost on the app, like the equivalent is just the advantage. Am
1 second.
I tripping? Like I feel like it's symmetrical.
Um, I mean, so like I think I agree with the symmetry. But I think the way it plays out in debate is just obviously unfair to the neg. Like this, which is what I'm trying to get at.
Why? Like I feel like this is because you are in policy and this does not happen. But I can't identify a logical reason why it should be unfair to the neg.
Um, so yeah, I mean, PF I think is broken because for basically like when so like what I was going to say uh is based in like when the app and neg speak first or
Right,
whoever who speaks first.
right.
Um, so like let's say the neg speaks first and they're like oil DA, some other DA,
Hmm.
and the app is like, okay, we're gonna read our like case, which is 3 minutes and 55 seconds, and we've written a 3 minute 55 second case on purpose. And then the last 5 seconds is going to be announced to Saudi Arabia that we're going to buy oil at the same price and the same amount,
Right.
and a thing to solve the other DA.
Yeah.
Um, like
Then wait, but then in the next speech on
so,
the neg can do
yeah,
the same thing against the app advantages.
yeah. So in first rebuttal, the neg says we privately increase funding for
Sure.
domestic nuclear energy. Um, okay,
Or I
so
mean,
let's
that seems like even like more of a counterplan. Like I feel like the advantage counterplans make a better example. Like we will do this thing that avoids this war or something. I
uh,
don't.
okay, yeah. We privately announced to China that we would not
Yeah.
respond to a Taiwanese invasion. Sure.
Yeah.
Let's say the Aff is a Taiwan invasion scenario. Um, okay, so yeah, no, I mean, I guess I mean the way it would be debated out is symmetrical.
Let's go.
Um, but like
PF is weird. PF is different.
no, like yes, PF is weird and different, but
Yeah.
I still like I'm on board with like yes, it's symmetrical, and I still think it's obviously unfair to the negative.
I don't see it. Like maybe this is because I haven't been in policy debate. So like I haven't experienced uh the
Well,
playing field that you're
so
covering. Yeah.
the problem is that the Aff gets to say that our policy of investing or the federal government investing in nuclear energy is better than um, DA plus announced that we won't respond to Taiwanese invasion.
Hmm.
Um, but the neg doesn't get to say our policy of Saudi oil DA is better than uh, announced to Saudi that will maintain oil cuts.
Well,
Like the neg doesn't advocate.
that's only if they don't choose to advocate a counterplan.
So like the neg just gets so like this world of debate is like the neg gets like infinite sets of advantage counterplans to solve AF advantages,
Yes.
and the AF gets infinite sets of extratopical parts of their plan to solve DAs.
Yeah, I think there still can be feasibility debates about them, right? Like this is bad or wouldn't work or like, you know, is
Yeah, I mean the app is obviously going to say like China doesn't believe us,
right,
um,
right, right.
or like the invasion would still go nuclear even if the United States didn't get involved.
Yeah, and the neg will do similar
Um,
things. Like they'll say like the signal to Saudi Arabia doesn't solve the DA link. They see through
yeah,
it. Whatever.
um, yeah. I mean, I just this would just be a total mess. Like,
Yeah, that's probably true. It would probably be
what?
awful, like to judge. Like,
Because wait, so there's a further question of like when you get to introduce the extratopical blanks, like if you get them in rebuttal,
right.
or
That's
if
what
you
I was
only
gonna
get them in
say.
constructives.
I low-key think you should get
Uh,
them in rebuttal.
dude, that's a disaster.
It is a disaster, but like, okay, why does this not stem from our commonly shared interpretation of the rules?
Uh, so something that you might say, um, in response to advantage counterplans in general, which might be persuasive, is that the formal comprehensive plan or like the general whatever language it is only refers to the resolution.
Right,
It's not a general permission to forward advocacies.
right.
Um, and that would eliminate advantage counterplans because then the negative can say nothing.
But
That's
then
not
but then it's unclear. Like then we go back to the question you were asking earlier of like what does it even mean for the con to be able to offer a generalized practical solution?
I think that's just like meaningless then. If it's only in reference to the resolution.
But then like then that would be textual evidence against that interpretation in my mind.
Yeah, I'm also fine saying that like the people who wrote the NSDA rulebook probably aren't like top legal scholars who abide by the surplusage doctrine.
But I mean like I feel like it's not just surplusage dog. Like I feel like it's just it's they don't have to be top legal scholars for them to have probably intended to imply that both sides get this.
Um, so I mean, maybe what they're referencing is like is like maybe this is evidence of like the most likely the most likely result interpretation of like the negative offers kind of what they think would be the affirmatives plan,
But they do
which is
say
just weird.
advocacy though. Like they do say like you are they say the word offer, right? Or they say the word what is it? Rather they should offer um reasoning to support a position of advocacy may offer generalized practical solutions. Like that's a lot of words that seems like textual evidence stacked up against you.
Yeah, dude, this seems like a great reason to rewrite the PF rulebook.
I a hundred
Like,
percent agree. I 100%. Like, we need to go ask these people who wrote these. Like, first of all, what did you mean? And second of all, why did you mean that? Because it seems like what they meant is something that's quite bad for PF.
yeah,
But until then, perhaps there is room for some terrorism.
I mean, I think this just starts at zero in front of most people. Um,
But why? Wait, I don't understand why though. Like, I feel like that kind of annoys me. Like, why should this start at zero if it is a valid interpretation of the rules? Like, just because norms.
uh, yeah, I mean, norms, like, I mean, like before this, I had never read or thought about the PF rulebook. Uh, but just like my immediate disgust at the possibility of the affirmative being able to offer advantage counterplans, um, I think is a hurdle that you need to kind of explain your way
Yeah.
out of in a 40-minute debate round when
Yeah,
you
I mean,
also need to be answering the rest. So it's something that's hard to do.
I guess I would just hope that most of the judges are not like policy coaches or debaters because I feel like you're
I
right.
mean, yeah, I think if you said this to a PFer, they'd be like, "What the? Why does the AF get advantage counterplans?" Like, I feel like
You
this is
just
not
you don't
commonly
call
shared
it.
sentiment about
I
here.
feel like I actually disagree. I actually disagree a lot. I think that if I just say like in my rebuttal against your oil DA, like response number four, just like casually drop it. Response number four, it seems like we could just tell Saudi Arabia
Yeah,
that
dude,
it's
I had to do. I had to deal with this against Carey Academy constantly in LD debate. This was something that they said every single time I would debate them. It's just like, yeah, we can just solve that problem another way. I don't understand.
Facts,
It
facts.
would always be ambiguous. It would never be specified, and it would just be like hand wavy about. It's like, what? You just do this somewhere else.
That sounds like a
Um,
generalized practical solution to me.
well, it's overgeneralized and therefore not practical is the problem.
That's fair. That's fair. But yeah, I
Uh,
legitimately don't understand how a technical judge could vote against you if you just casually drop like response number 4 against the oil DA. We will just tell Saudi like we could just tell Saudi Arabia that this is not happening. And then they respond, they say this is not how debate works. You say, bro, read the fucking rules. You send the rules to the judge. Judge reads the rules. They say, oh yeah, it does say you can offer a generalized practical solution. GG.
um, yeah, no, I think if that's the way the round plays out, I probably vote for the tell Saudi Arabia secretly.
Let's go.
Um, but yeah, it's just
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's a mess. If this becomes a Norman PF, then I probably have a lot to answer for. But hey, we innovation is cool, right? We should play around more, and playing is fun.
yeah. And to be clear, if this happens and you're negative, you should clearly say that even though it's formally symmetrical, it screws over the negative way more than the F.
I still disagree with this, but you should say that. You like I
No,
think
I mean, so they can make the same arguments on both sides, but like the quality of the arguments will just be better when you're affirmative.
right, that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, I mean, especially, I think the go-to strategy if someone tries this and you have anyone who like has done LD or policy is you just call it what it actually is. You say like, this is the AF attempting to read an extra topical plank, which is like
Yeah.
egregiously unfair. And then honestly, this is kind of sad, but you probably don't even need anything else. Like you could just say those words and like it's GG.
Yeah, I mean that's what like one and T shells in policy look like. That's fine.
Um, okay, a few like one or two last questions about nuclear energy, and then I'll let you go.
Okay.
You gave me a wonderful neg strategy on the oil DA. What do you think you would do if you had to be ath? You can keep it shorter.
I mean, the app that I described they would read is probably the app that I would read. Just like
Like,
nuclear energy is good. It stabilizes U.S. energy production. Other forms of energy are unsustainable, will result in these problems. Yeah,
that makes sense. What is the
yeah.
impact to stabilizing energy production?
So there are grid, you can say general grid impacts.
Mhm.
And just like grid shutdown would obviously be really bad. Uh, you could say warming. You could say reliance on oil will cause oil wars uh, in the short term because we'll need to produce more. Um, what else could you say? Uh, there's like rare earth mining stuff, but that probably links to you going for nuclear.
Right.
Um, there might be something about like tech advancement
Oh
of
yeah,
like investment in nuclear energy generally results in other forms of tech advancement, which would be
yeah,
good
makes sense.
as just like a fun trick. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't do a lot of nuclear energy research at any point in my career.
That's totally fair.
Um, unfortunately, really.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Last question for you. Um, the latest trend in PF is to steal as many Ks as we can from policy and LD and
Yeah.
try to cram them into 4-minute speeches. Um, what Ks would you expect on the nuclear energy topic specifically?
Um,
I guess like topical Ks, right? Like people will read whatever
yeah.
on T stuff.
The topical stuff is probably just going to be, well, they're all going to be connected to some like structural claim about ontology. Uh, and the nuclear energy link is going to be like it would get placed in disproportionately black neighborhoods. Uh, the process of getting the material would be violent towards certain communities, like mining in Africa or wherever we would source the uranium or plutonium from. Um, so like those are probably like the topical link arguments.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't think those link arguments are great.
But you just say that that's not true. Like if you're Aff, like,
I mean, if you're AF, you should say that like it's inevitable. It happens in the status quo. We don't
right.
make it much worse, and the case outweighs.
Okay, yeah, fair.
Um, yeah, like it should be pretty quick. Um, and then you could just go for. I mean, if you're reading the K and you want to maximize win rate, you should just go for the Fiat K. You should be like they don't get to Fiat anything. Fiat is violent. Um, those style arguments.
How does that work? Like, what are the reasons why Fiat is violent?
I mean, it depends on kind of what area of the library you're sourcing this from. Um, so depending on the K, there will be just a bunch of different reasons why Fiat is violent. If you want to look into this, there's the policy wiki where you can download lots of Fiat K style arguments. Um, Dude, my favorite one, the Buddhist stuff is good, but this is because I've been influenced too much by a previous guest of yours and Jacob Palmer.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, the Buddhist arguments are interesting. Last question you said earlier, I mean, I think that I've had this explained to me a few times already. What did you mean by like claims about ontology at the start of these cases?
Oh, so ontology definition is just the study of being. But in policy debate, you're just going to make structural claims about certain features of the world. So you're going to say that like anti-blackness is a structural feature of the United States federal government. You're going to say federal colonialism is a structural feature of the United States government, something that can't be avoided if we're using the
Hmm.
USFG as the actor. And that's where some of the Fiat case stuff will come in. You're going to be like this advocating for this actor is something that's inherently violent. We should kind of decolonize educational spaces. This is all prior questions to these are all prior questions to whether or not the implementation of the plan would be good, which we also disagree with because we think it would be inherently violent.
That makes sense. So, I guess from my perspective, then, it seems like these claims about ontology function in two ways. Like, one, maybe it provides you an extra link, like they use the state, that's inherently violent. And two, it
Yeah,
provides you insulation against like any link defense arguments they read. Like, if for example, if the AF says like, "Nah, we're gonna do it in a good way," then you can be like, "Nah, like it's impossible."
yeah. So that those things are both true. They also give you framework arguments.
Right.
Um, so answering like clash standards, like we should talk about the state, uh, and they tend to frame impacts as well. So the impact to settler colonialism critiques will normally be something along the lines of violence against Indigenous Americans, and the alternative will be a way to resolve the ontological problem.
That
Um,
makes sense.
so
Um, Beautiful. Okay, well, those are all the questions that I have for you about nuclear energy. Do you have any last piece of wisdom, nugget of wisdom to dispense to our audience?
uh, Dude, I don't know about any great nuggets of wisdom. I would suggest reading What We Owe to Each Other by Tim Scanlon though. Like this is a book that even like I just think it's good to read.
Why do you think
Um,
it's good to read?
uh, so I think it diagnoses kind of what's really at the heart of wronging someone. So like various moral theories will have an explanation of what it is to do a wrong action. So if you're a utilitarian, you're going to say that well you failed to maximize expected well-being. If you're a Kantian, you're going to say well you created this kind of internal contradiction within your will. But if you're a contractualist, you're going to say that well what you did couldn't be justified to other people on reasonable grounds. And I think that that is the best description of what it means to do a moral wrong. Um, and I think people should think about that more.
That's interesting. Yeah, maybe, hey, maybe this time I'll get past the intro. Just for you.
Yeah, but like I'm also like I just love philosophy, so this is just a feature of my life that I will probably continue to do for the next 60 years, which is not something that a lot of people relate to.
That's fair. But you should relate to a little bit out there, audience. Go read some philosophy. It's a good thing to do.
It is a good thing to do.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Bennett, for being on. Seriously
Yeah,
appreciate it.
it was a pleasure.
Okay, bye-bye.